Namaste, everyone. I'm Roshan Karyappa, and welcome to another episode of the Bharatvaarta podcast. With India and the world battling a pandemic, there has been an acute focus on our healthcare infrastructure, capacity, and so on. Many of us have considered over the last few weeks and months what could have been better. And in India, I mean, there's a whole laundry list of things that we can think of, right? From infrastructure to patient care to everything in between. Now, to understand this in greater detail, we have a fantastic lineup of guests today. We're joined by Prachi Sinha, who's the head of healthcare investments at Axelor Ventures. Axelor runs India's largest accelerator program and funds early stage healthcare startups as well. She'll be speaking about some of the innovation opportunities in the sector. Welcome to the podcast, Prachi.
Hi, Roshan. Thanks for having me here.
We also have Varun Zaveri, who is an officer on special duty at the National Health Authority. He's particularly associated with the Ayushman Bharat program. He's here in his individual capacity and he's not representing the government's views on things, but he will be speaking from a policy perspective. Welcome, Varun. Good to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Roshan. Great pleasure to joining you all.
Yeah, pleasure as well. And finally, we have one of our more popular guests who returns today. We have Dr. Bhushan Shukla. You've heard him on a previous podcast as well. He's a practicing psychiatrist and psychotherapist with over 2 decades of experience in the field. We'll hope to hear from him on a practitioner's perspective. Very glad to have you back on the podcast, Dr. Bhushan. Right. So before we speak about some of the more fundamental areas that I briefly touched upon, let's talk about COVID itself and how we've handled that, right? And we'll start with you, Dr. Bhushan. I know that your wife is on the front lines of this as well, right? And you have been living, breathing this very closely, right? How have we handled the COVID-19 pandemic, and what would you score us out of, say, a metric of 10?
The places where we have not been overwhelmed by COVID, I think we are doing quite well. Private sector and government sector is working together. Obviously, the major work is done by government sector, and within their limitations, they are doing a fabulous job. So we are good. The only thing is that when it starts overwhelming us, like it is happening in Delhi or Mumbai, then the unraveling can start, because we are just at the beginning of this. We haven't seen anywhere the thick or the end of this thing at all.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess once this thing, compounds and there's a real stress on our facilities, I mean, that's when some of these things will come to bear as well, right? So, Varun, how would you say that we have fared on this?
Well, I think, it's definitely been a good strategy. The idea of, starting with an initial lockdown, that has definitely helped us in strengthening our health system. Whether it's with regard to procuring test kits, or whether it's with regard to designing new protocols, and especially a lot of this strengthening has taken place at the state level. So when you look at other countries such as Italy and UK, which actually went into a lockdown much at a later stage, you will see that there is a huge difference in terms of the mortality rate, especially with the deaths which have caused. And just one small metric is that when the lockdown started, the rate of transmission, which we call it as R naught, was around 1.8. Today that R naught is 1.2. For the curve to actually start flattening or to start going down, we need to decrease it below 1. So if you look at the factual data, we can see that the lockdown has been I would say reasonably a success. But I also agree with what Dr. Bhushan said, that there are a few places which have been overwhelmed by the type of cases that are coming. So I think there needs to be somewhat more capacity building which is required. At the same time, there is more monitoring which is required for those places.
Sure. Good points. Prachi, your comments on this?
Yeah, so, to score this, I think the general score should be a function of 3 things. 1/4 of that should come from the general preparedness, right? What was the level of infrastructure itself to start out with? This remaining 3/4, which is more important, is the immediate response, whether it was the government or the private sector, mostly the government, like Dr. Bhushan mentioned. and how science catching up. So how are innovations catching up? What is the kind of inputs and impetus given to that? Because ultimately I believe that the solution to this is going to come from science, right? So I would suggest that in terms of response, as well as in terms of the kind of innovations that we are trying to at least support, we've done fairly well. Obviously, in terms of infrastructure, we were not there, but I think the fact that we have been able to perform better on the other two metrics has sort of helped us, not let the situation get too much out of hand.
Okay. So we'll continue with you, Prachi. So help us understand, how is this ecosystem, healthcare ecosystem structured in the country, and how are these incentives mapped and so on? Can you help us understand with a few of these, few examples as well?
Sure, Roshan. So, healthcare is largely an incumbents industry, and the way that incentive structures have been lined, it's one of those sectors where it's very tough to break that cycle. Which is why, if you notice, the kind of enterprise level innovations that happen in healthcare will definitely lag the other sectors, whether it's banking and finance, or whether it's commerce or retail, etc. The reason obviously is clear. It's ultimately a person's life at stake, right? And so all kinds of stringent measures, whether it's just a delivery model, or whether it's science side innovation, have to be put in place. But what happens many times is that the pace at which a startup is supposed to function is quite fast, uh, whereas the pace of the sector to catch up to that ends up being slow, right? And the problem is that a lot of times startups face numerous roadblocks in trying to break the way that incentive structures are aligned. So we have a running joke in the VC industry that practically anyone and everyone starts off with solving healthcare and ends up becoming a electronic health record solution. uh, so that is in a single line description of where we are. Having said that, I think more and more innovators right now are ready to take on that mantle and persist, stay through the course of this longer sales cycles and longer turnarounds in healthcare. And we ourselves, so from my experience ourselves, our focus has always been on seeing how science can solve this, right? You can't really expect the expenditure on healthcare to go up from where it is. So how do you fill that gap? And the answer that is quite clear, right? It has to be through science and technology. And that is what we have been trying to back. That is what we are looking out for, because uh, there are great advantages out of India. I don't think that the level of or the quality of innovators in India is anywhere below globally. If not anything, they are at par. What is needed is enabling systems, right, to get the science out of the lab, to make sure that the whole process of validation of the business is seamless for the innovator, so that the innovator or the scientist can continue to focus on the science as opposed to bothering too much about the business. So
Right.
so that is how I would like to describe innovation in a nutshell.
Right. So, Varun, and plenty of other industry sectors, right? I mean, people are. I was talking about this yesterday as well with Amit, in fact, and Anand Lunia and Srivatsa on opportunities post COVID. A lot of times, I mean, we're happy for the government to kind of step aside, and let innovators function. But healthcare is one thing where the government cannot avoid being part of this, right? So is there an attempt by the government or people in policy to kind of look at this holistically, see what systems are working abroad? It could be the NHS or it could be the US healthcare, whatever it is, compare and sort of draft these into being. Is there such an attempt as such?
So yeah, Roshan, I agree when you said that the government has to become a very integrate part, to the entire innovation ecosystem that is out there. And especially to what Prachi said is that, we have probably achieved some sort of a traction in areas such as fintech, but, we haven't really, explored the space of, the healthcare, especially for our startups. So, the one big thing that we as NHA are doing is that we are starting a new program which is called the Market Access Program. And this is for actually promotion of all this innovation, because the idea is that, there are a lot of innovations which are actually getting developed, but they are not getting the access to the market. With Ayushman Bharat, we have an access to 21,000 hospitals. So the program is going to focus on 4 different fronts. The first front is how to streamline validation. What happens is that there are no particular standards which are out there in the country with regard to the validation, that what is a standardized set. Now, due to that, a particular innovator, whenever he goes to different states, they keep asking him to do different types of validation studies. So this basically ended up in like a piloting or a validation spiral, where he has to keep putting his money, and these are cost intensive and time intensive studies. So we are working with multiple partners to come up with some sort of a uniform validation framework. The second is access to funding. We are on our way to craft out a fund along with development partners, and this is a private capital fund which would be offering both grant as well as debt. So it's basically a sort of a blended financing facility which would be offered to private sector, and that includes hospitals, manufacturers, as well as innovators, all these 3 categories. So that is something that we are helping design. The third one is probably the one of the most important, is that we are helping them gain access to the procurement. Now, a lot of these innovations that we have seen, probably, they do get some sort of an access in private hospitals. And when I say private hospital, the top tier private hospitals. But, the public hospital is a huge chunk of the service, which is availed in India. And, when I say public hospital, I mean the district hospitals, the taluka hospitals, the CHCs. There is a huge opportunity there, and there are no innovations which are actually getting percolated to that level. So, we have tied up with the government e-marketplace, wherein we are streamlining the particular flow, such that every particular entity which wants to procure these innovations, it can directly procure from this government e-marketplace. And the fourth one is that we are also providing a lot of marketplace advisory, because since we are working on such a huge scale, we are getting a lot of data in terms of what is the type of utilization that is happening, and we are understanding that where exactly are those gaps. So we want to pinpoint to the innovators that these are the places which have these gaps in terms of different specialties, in terms of different requirements, so that it becomes much easier for them to go and access this particular opportunities. So in all, this is a program that we are launching out soon, and we feel that a program like this will catalyze the entire innovations sector in a very big way. And we would love to involve as many private players as possible to ensure that even their priorities and their focus areas are taken care of.
Right. Interesting. So, Dr. Bhushan, as a practitioner who works within the system, right, would you have any comments in terms of what Varun just said?
So see, I started my practice in 2000, and before that I have trained in a private medical college for my MBBS, then a government medical college for my MD. I have worked as a lecturer there for a year, and I have worked in UK for 4 years, and now I'm in private practice. What I have seen from look of all these systems and what I see in my private practice today is that the great innovations that are being talked about haven't reached me at all. In fact, the only innovation that has reached me in 20 years is what has happened in the last 2 months, which is teleconsulting. Because no matter what you try to do, unfortunately, the Medical Council of India and now the Board of Governors who manage individual doctors, who are the, we can't say gatekeepers, but really the news holders for doctors, take pride in saying no to everything. You would be surprised to know that they actually had to allow teleconsultation 2 months ago. Till then, it was not allowed. Things that the whole world has taken for granted, simple innovations in clinical practice that should be possible, are not allowed. There is a huge amount of red tape, and it is everybody knows that it is impossible to cut through this red tape. So all the money that is being poured into there, I don't know where it is going. It never reaches the patient. It never reaches the doctors. We don't see these innovations. Second thing is that we are already talking about private funding coming into this. And as an individual doctor, this makes me and most of my colleagues extremely anxious, because those of us who work for corporate sector, who are corporate doctors, are already under tremendous pressure of many unethical things as well, because their profit is the motive. And it is literally like the individual practitioner like me or a doctor like me is being crushed from all these sides, and we keep hearing this talk about innovation, and we wonder really what this is, कि यार ये कौन से खेत की मूली है, ये अपने को कब दिखेगी, अपने पेशेंट तक कब पहुंचेगी, मालूम नहीं.
Right, right. No, I mean that's a fair point, right? But then, I mean, if you look at healthcare entrepreneurship as well, and Prachi, you could add to this as well. It's really such a fight to build a profitable enterprise.
Absolutely. Like I said, it's a model where you have to incentivize every single player. So let's chart out the model, right? You have doctors, you have hospitals, you have pharma marketing, agents, MRs on the ground. You have the patient themselves. Then you have insurance coming in. You have a corporate insurance, employee benefit. All of these have to see the value for one single healthcare innovation to work. What ended up happening, and like Dr. Bhushan was mentioning, right, in the last 2 months, because of the perception of risk being very high and of generally being, everyone being very pro innovation, a lot of things have ended up happening which have taken forever. So telemedicine, for example, it was a behavior that was hitherto unthought of. Why should a patient do a consultation on video as opposed to meeting the GP or the specialist in person? But look at the numbers. Soon as that happened and soon as that got approved, I can quote figures. The top 2 or 3 startups, and they are, you can call them startups, but they have significant amount of funding. They are pretty advanced, but they ended up increasing their teleconsult numbers per day by 100%. Right. So someone who was doing 3,000 is now doing 8,000. Someone who was doing 4,000 is now doing 10,000, and this is per day numbers. You can imagine the extent of this sort of, extending to other areas as well. Let's take e-pharmacy. I understandably a lot of regulations, and there was still it's still unclear, but because of the approvals they got, within 2 months they ended up being from less than 2 to 3% of the overall pharmacy sales to more than 5%. Some even claim to be reaching as high as 10%, right? Because what has ended up happening is that they have been fairly nimble. They have managed to rope in some of the standalone retailers, pharmacy retailers, which is around 8.5 to 9 lakhs in India, right? And ultimately ensure that the person who's ordering the drug gets the drug in less than 24 hours if possible. Let's take more nuanced therapy side innovations, right? Again, we have startups that are doing unbundling models and sort of utilizing doctors' capacity, hospitals, OTs, and subsidizing diagnostics, ultimately to reduce the cost of surgery, to make it like a factory model where this is available at a fixed cost, right? This is a conversation we've had earlier, that pre-COVID, it was very tough to sort of still get this model clear to a lot of people, whether it's fellow investors, whether it was someone from the industry itself. They faced some 20 days of lockdown because everything was on a standstill. But the moment, say, Bangalore started to open, within 20 days, they are already at their pre-COVID numbers, right? So that just goes on to say that everyone who was getting impacted by this startup, whether it was the doctor, the hospital, or the patient, most importantly, has quickly adapted to say that, okay, right now my need is to get a surgery, and this is something that is getting me to that at a cheaper cost without sacrificing the quality, right? So the positive change that I see from COVID is that people have become more open to innovation, to adopting innovation, to accepting it as a daily part of their life.
Right. Interesting. So Varun, I mean, you have perhaps the toughest challenge, right? I mean, from a government perspective, which is that, hey, how do you bring all of these disparate entities together and make it function in some sort of a well-oiled machinery, right? So Dr. Bhushan mentioned Medical Council of India as well, and so on. Whether it is infrastructure, whether it's human resources, we see that the optimum capability or the optimum innovation is not supported, right? And we see that the government is not short of policies. I mean, of course, we have plenty of new policies coming up with very good intent and even good execution, I would say, right? As you've seen with adoption on some of the newer, like you were mentioning Ayushman Bharat and so on. But is there a requirement for a fundamental reform of the system itself?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Roshan, and I think one very big aspect that we haven't really focused on when it comes to innovation is how do you incentivize the adopters of innovation. And I think that is the fundamental lever that we have been discussing, that when even Dr. Bhushan said that how doctors are not engaged. Ideally the problem is that we haven't really created structures which actually incentivizes people and institutions who are ready to take a risk and try out the new innovations. Now there is such a big inertia to try out these new technologies, because these are all healthcare technologies. So most of them have an interface with the patients, and no doctor want to leverage his or her reputation by trying out a new technology which might not be having the best credentials. That's why the particular doctor or the institution, they generally try to go towards a safe pathway. Now, what has happened in the last 2 months is very interesting. That there are a lot of new regulations and new permissions and new approvals which have cropped up. It is often said that necessity is the mother of invention. Here, it is more like necessity is the mother of regulation. Uh, so the good part is that I see a sort of a new regulation regime which is coming into play with regard to healthcare technologies, which understands the importance of having these innovations, especially considering the fact that the demand for healthcare services are rising and the supply is very limited, the supply of providers. So the idea is that how do you improve the overall efficiency, and that's where the innovations, they actually kick in. With regard to our perspective, the program that I described before, the idea, and just to clarify with the private capital front, the private capital here is going to be housed at a particular entity, which is a not-for-profit academic entity, and that private capital will be taken from foundations and industry CSRs, and not from VC funds. So in a way, we are trying to make it separate from the institutional areas, where they want to probably their only focus is to make profit. So there is some sort of a difference there. But in terms of our particular focus area, we are ensuring that Ayushman Bharat, what it does is that at the end of the day, it is a payer of the care. So, we provide healthcare coverage to more than 50 crore Indian citizens. And, we have more than 22,000 hospitals in our network. And, whenever a particular beneficiary, he goes and gets treatment, we pay against that particular treatment. So where we want to leverage our positioning is that we want to say that since the government is reimbursing to both public as well as private hospitals, we definitely want to see if a certain part of that amount, especially in the public hospital, can be utilized for procuring innovations. So in a way, we are trying to leverage our position as a payer and try to make a positive change. Again, it's a recommendation that we are working on and trying to see if something like that can be worked out. But this is something which is very important, that here we are trying to give some sort of a financial incentive to the adopters, to both the doctors and the hospitals. So I think we are trying to use those regulatory levers which are possible, but at the same time, in the entire design and the implementation, we are trying to ensure that all the different players which are there in this particular ecosystem, they can come on the same table and probably be responsible for contributing to this program. So of course it's a tough job, but I think something like this is definitely required, and this is very similar to what developed countries like NHS is doing, or probably Canada is doing, where they have similar sort of structures. So I think it is high time that India also joins that particular bandwagon.
Right. Dr. Bhushan, I'm sure, having worked, I think, in the NHS as well, right? Or experienced it rather, you have some comments on that, right?
So, yeah, I agree with you that our fundamentals need to change. And I think people also need to get an idea of how complexly interwoven our fundamentals are. The thing is that we look at healthcare workers, nurses, doctors, pharmacists, all sorts of people, and there has to be a clear streamlining about exactly what they are. Right now, we don't even know whether healthcare is a basic right to be provided by government, or is it a charity to be done by CSR? Is it social service? Is it a professional duty? Is it a business? Is it industry? Exactly what it is. All these models are working at one go, creating a lot of confusion. Even same people are playing different roles in different models. This is not doable. This is not acceptable. Second thing is that we have multiple streams which no other country in the world have. We have entire Ayush and you have modern medicine standing side by side. No country in the world does that. Now, if we are really going to talk about science and go by evidence, are we really going to throw out Ayush completely? Because very little is evidence based. So all these confusions put together, and who funds it? Right now, huge amount of funding is coming from individuals. They are funding their own healthcare. The problem here, I think, Roshan, is that government is trying to, and this is not just this government, all governments have done it all along. They have been putting band-aids on a fracture. We need a fundamental realignment of healthcare philosophy.
Right.
There has to be a single payer. There has to be a single way of training. There has to be a clear single role through the nation. For example, we talk about NHS or all of these things. There, all the doctors are salary holding servants.
Right.
How about that? In India, we have made it so complex. For example, if I work for a government hospital, then I am a salaried individual. If I work for a private institution, then I have salary plus incentive. When I go to my private practice, suddenly I become all like a businessman. I'm even taxed by local council as a businessman. Right? So all this confusion has to stop somewhere, and I do not see government taking any concrete steps in that direction. Even the new schemes that government comes up with, for example, Ayushman Bharat, there are already hundreds of schemes present in all the states given by the name of parents and whatever of the politicians. Patient does not even know which scheme should I come under, where should I apply, what should I do. There is a confusion there. So unless there is a very clear streamlining and the turbulence is taken away as a part of design, whatever we talk about innovation is not going to work, because the real advantage that India has is the economy of scale.
Right. So couple of things, sorry, I want to pick up on that you mentioned, right? And you could address that as well. So one is the sheer scale, right, which you mentioned. I mean, given, 1.4 billion people, and, our ratio of doctors to the population is not, not really like optimal, I would say, right? And you have all of these different structures involved that's creating a sort of a scarcity, right? And all of these, under these constraints, is it possible for us to even think of a universal, affordable, quality healthcare?
I think it is very much possible.
Okay.
No matter how complex it looks at this point of time.
On all three parameters, universal, affordable, and quality?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is absolutely possible if government takes responsibility of that. If government declares that it is our agenda to make healthcare as a 10-year goal where we take India to an NHS-like system. It will start from budgetary allocation. It will need to involve all the political parties, because for a simple reason, we live in a democracy, which is a great thing for us, but all political parties have their own idea about healthcare. Unfortunately, politicians and bureaucrats are not trained in healthcare at all. Very few of them are actually public health experts. And those who are public health experts and pass there and become IAS officers are actually put in mining and defense and whatnot. So by the time they actually come back to talk about healthcare, they have forgotten all about healthcare. So we need dedicated, concentrated effort with a timeline or 10 years or 15 years. And this can be done. We can build it grounds up. See, look at the basic simple thing that you need people to run healthcare. You need professionals to run healthcare. You need doctors, you need nurses, you need paramedicals. Now, if private institutions which are owned by politicians are training centers and government seats are falling by percentage every year, how are you going to develop professionals who are actually interested in serving people? I have been a student of private medical college as well as a government medical college. I can tell you very clearly that unless government takes over the education completely, this is not going to get sorted. Government will have to put in money. Our GDP, percentage of GDP that is being spent here is minuscule. We are spending 1/10 of what we should be doing. So intent has to be there, money has to be there, and a consensus has to be there across the party lines, because we cannot afford to change these lines every 3 or 4 years.
Right. And human resources is, again, one of the key aspects in this whole equation, right? And again, there is like a scarcity that I mentioned as well. Prachi, how do you see a solution for this problem? Is there a way for us to, widen the base of medical professionals, healthcare professionals?
See, to answer that with a yes or no is going to have serious repercussions on the quality, right? I can't just say, is there a need? Yes, of course. But does that mean you produce more nurses, more doctors? No, because that has to be gated by some quality metrics. I'm coming back to my original point, which is to say that, yes, the ratio of doctors to, the population in India is severely skewed. It's 1:10,000. Same goes for infrastructure, same goes for nurses, right? But if you have to think of a solution, you have to take into advantage, policy as well as innovation. Let's talk about, public health itself. Right now, public health is a state issue, right? For the central government to have a way in, it needs to become beyond, the boundaries need to be clarified, is what I mean. You can't have a payer which is a central government and a provider which is a state government. Conflicts are bound to arise, right? But how do you solve that? Varun initially was talking about the number of hospitals, which is a very large chunk that are currently under Ayushman Bharat. But within Karnataka, we were doing this for research for one of our startups. I think 90% of the surgeries that are prescribed are done still with the private hospitals that have a tie-up with Ayushman Bharat, right? And then how does the government, the government is then stuck with paying for these. Is there a way then you can look at some startups that are probably doing something to reduce the cost, right? And how many of those initiatives are actively being done by the government? See, paying for the startup is not something that I think the government should mandate to start off with, because there are enough VCs in India who are doing this, who have taken on this mantle. Previous to COVID, there were a lot of international VCs also. Let's hope that, jury is still out on how that will shape up. But I think what needs to be done is let's start with actually trying to build bridges, right? And I think all three of us have been reiterating this point throughout the discussion, which is to say that incentives are still misaligned. And maybe a single body needs to come in, which has to be a regulatory body, to say that, this is how you have to function. You have to let go of this. You can't expect a doctor to let go of his personal income if he or she is not making enough from the government income, right? Make it worth the while. You can't expect a hospital to not think of profit. How is a private hospital going to function otherwise? Similarly, you can't expect a patient, especially an uninsured patient, to cover all of the costs. It's a very tough, it's a complicated problem. It's a wicked problem. It doesn't have a streamlined single point answer, right? But I think just starting with looking at innovations that are there, that are struggling very hard to get some level of sponsorship. And when I say sponsorship, I mean credibility sponsorship, right? A chance to prove themselves to work with the government, right? If large corporations can do it, you are part of a startup that works with the largest banks in India, right? If they can do it, and they are obviously also among the most regulated in the world, why is the government still feeling restraint in coming out and actively looking at this and going beyond just grants? Like I said, I think financing can be taken care of by the private sector till the time there is an uptake of these innovations, and that can only come from a single body, which is going to be the regulator, and hopefully in the long term become the payer as well.
Right, right. So Varun, not to pile on you, I mean, I keep saying that, you perhaps, I mean, you have the hardest position to, be, right, be in, which is align all of these people together and get them working in a sort of a synchronous way, right? Let's look at, Ayushman Bharat as an example, right? I think it was launched in September 2018. About more than a crore people have availed treatment. The numbers are around 13,000 plus crores. Through a network of 21,000 public and private hospitals and so on. Now, this is a huge scale, right? Uh, the thing that strikes me is, okay, I mean, patient care is something. I mean, the cost of patient care has come down and so on, right? Uh, can we not see similar investments and similar schemes on, let's say, other things like increasing hospital beds and so on and so forth? I mean, is that in the pipeline as well? Are there some schemes like on of that nature? Is something that we can expect as well?
Thank you, Roshan, and I'm really happy that you know the exact progress of the scheme, because this is a very recent progress that just within 20 months we were able to provide 1 crore free treatments, and we cover 40% of India's population, the most poor and vulnerable families. So that comes to more than 50 crore Indian citizens. I think there are a few points that I would like to clarify. The first of all, the point that Dr. Bhushan made about how there are different schemes which are running in the states. From day one, what we have done is that when Ayushman Bharat gets implemented, and right now it is implemented in 33 out of 36 states and union territories. So when Ayushman Bharat gets implemented in that particular state, we do a convergence of the state scheme with the Ayushman Bharat. To give you an example, when we started this, Karnataka used to have 8 different schemes, for different section of workers. When we went, we converged all the scheme, and now there is only one scheme, which is Ayushman Bharat Arogya Karnataka scheme. So the confusion amongst the beneficiary, who is eligible, who is not eligible, it evades away. The second example is that of Maharashtra. Now Maharashtra has one scheme, which is the Ayushman Bharat Jyotiba Phule. The third example is of Gujarat, which had a Ma Yojana, and now it has only one Yojana. So, which is the Ayushman Bharat Ma Yojana. So the idea is that how do we reduce this duplication? And that was, one very important aspect that we want. So the idea is that all of us are moving towards one vision, which is one nation, one scheme, and which is Ayushman Bharat. And of course, with the state schemes converging it. The second part is that here, how the payment mechanism works is that the central government, it contributes 60%, and the state government, it contributes 40%. So it's your normal, central scheme, which has a contribution of 60s to 40. And then for a few states, it is, 90s to 10, depending on the different geographies. The third part, which is a very essential part, is that in the 22,000 hospitals that we have, 50% of them are private. Now, when the private hospital is giving out treatment, it is not charging its normal rates. It is charging the fixed package rates, which have been approved before. Now, these package rates are the same rates that we give to the public as well as to the private. So it is not that, the private hospitals are making any undue profit. Rather than that, the fixed package rates, it has given up some sort of a rationalization of package rates. And this is something which is, uniformly fair across the country, with, of course, some sort of a difference in terms of the quality, that if your hospital is there in metro city, you can get, plus 15%, and depending on the different sort of a quality. So there are also, quality based differential payment of care, which happens. The fourth part is that, the very conception that we see that, it has to be the only responsibility of the government to run a health system. I think that is something which needs, some sort of a rethinking. Because I think, we have been very clear that, there needs to be a good involvement of the private sector. And at the same time, when you have that particular involvement, you also ensure that the rates which are given out, they are fixed. So in a way, you are involving the private sector. At the same time, you are rationalizing the entire pricing mechanism. So there are no any undue profits which are taking place. The fifth part, which is the most critical to what you asked with regard to setting up the new hospital infrastructure, in the budget announcement of 2020-21, the Honorable Finance Minister, she had announced, and this is something which has already in work, that there would be a new viability gap funding which would be created to set up hospitals in public-private partnership for Ayushman Bharat, especially in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So, what was happening earlier, that before Ayushman Bharat, the survey which was rolled out by the Ministry of Health, 6 crore Indian citizens, they used to fall below poverty line because of the catastrophic health expenditure. And then Ayushman Bharat came, it covered this section of the population. But at the same time, what we realized that the supply, especially in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities of the hospitals, they were not enough. So, there used to be a lot of, transportation that used to happen in, mega cities or in the metro cities. So the idea is that how do we empower this tier 2 and tier 3 cities? And that's why we are going ahead with this particular route about how to create that public-private partnership and set up new hospitals. And this particular new hospitals, which will be set up under this partnership, would be all empaneled, with Ayushman Bharat. And, we are trying to create some sort of a concessionaire agreement, which will basically govern the working of this particular hospitals. So in and all, I think the vision has been very clear. At least for the next 5 to 6 years, it is very clear that, you augment the demand through schemes like Ayushman Bharat. Second is that you also augment the supply, especially in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, by public-private partnership. And the third is that you focus on rationalizing the pricing so that you can increase the affordability of the care which is available. And at the same time, you also have some sort of a quality safeguards. And I think this is where, the vision really lies. And I think this is something where, the government is really working through.
Right. So I just want a quick follow-up on that, right? So the human resource element, which we briefly touched upon earlier as well, is a key element to this, right? So are you looking to open up new AIMS institutions and stuff like that? Is there some scope to perhaps look at that and widen the base of, medical professionals?
Yeah, that's a good question, Roshan. And what has really happened in the last 6 months is that, the whole field of medical education, because, medical education and the health system part, they are very intrinsically linked. So when we are looking at the health system, looking at medical education, for the human resources is very critical. Now, if you look at the last 6 months, a proposal has already been drafted, designed and sent, and also industrial consultation have been, already hosted. And this proposal has been floated by the NITI Aayog. Now, what it says is very interesting, is that, why don't we have a PPP model wherein the private players, they come and they upgrade the district hospital into medical college. So, you already have a district hospital, you already have an infrastructure. So either you build a particular medical college, you upgrade that particular district hospital to a medical college, or you link that particular district hospital and make a new medical college. So the vision is to build such type of medical college at some of the identified districts, especially the aspirational districts. Now, what this will do is, number one, it will tremendously improve the number of seats which are there with regard to medical education. So, it will directly improve upon the human resource supply. Number two is that it will rapidly strengthen the district hospitals and their particular treatment capacity. Because, when you go to a district hospital, they can probably provide, primary, secondary, and, the initial tertiary part of the service. They are not able to provide, advanced tertiary or the quaternary care that we generally refer to. So the idea is that when you open this medical college, that infrastructure upgradation which would be done, which would be tremendous. So I think, this two-part vision is actually getting encompassed under this particular proposal. And, to what Prachi said is that since health is a state subject, the center is getting, very much involved in a lot of designing policy, facilitating the implementation. But a lot of these decisions, they have to be finally made by the state governments. So this proposal is now sent to the state governments, to see what is the different type of support which is required. But I think, this type of vision, it has a lot of potential to transform the fundamentals of the healthcare system. And I think this is something that we are, closely following up on.
Right. So, Dr. Bhushan, yeah, please.
See, I think this is a great idea, and we hear great ideas from all governments. Unfortunately, I've been here 20 years, so seen at least 5-6 governments through, and different health secretaries and schemes and all of that. The difficulty is, what is basically wrong with Indian healthcare is being magnified by government schemes. And the core problem that we have is that we are a top-heavy healthcare. Indian healthcare is entirely geared for specialists and super specialists and beyond that, because we are pay-as-you-go system. The doctor is incentivized to do more instead of doing less. And customer has a free access. So same patient can go to 5 different doctors for exactly the same problem and actually block 5 slots, which otherwise should have been open. For example, I'm a super specialist, I'm a child psychiatrist, but 80% of the patients that come to me don't ever need to see a child psychiatrist. So it is actually a waste of resource. What we need is an excellent primary care to be focused on first. Building more aims and we need medical colleges, there is no doubt about this, but there is a fundamental need of revamping entire curriculum to generate private practitioners, or primary care practitioners first. We have 3 or 4 streams of medicine through Ayush and modern medicine. This needs to be promulgated into a single Indian medical graduate, and all these fancy stuff should be offered to people as post-graduation. Government will be surprised how many people will dump their homeopathy or Ayurveda training if they get their basic MBBS training as a rule. And Ayurveda and homeopathy is offered only as a post-graduation by choice. Government will be in for a shock if they actually see those numbers. Because this is something which is really important, that people need healthcare close to their home, preferably within walking distance or 10 minutes of driving distance on their two-wheelers or cycles. And that is primary healthcare. If primary healthcare is built well, it reduces significant burden on secondary healthcare. It reduces burden on tertiary and quaternary by doing a lot of preventative work. And unless we stay absolutely focused on that, it is not going to happen. Going to district hospitals is a brilliant idea, because we know that majority of the doctors who graduate from a medical college actually settle down within a 100-kilometer radius of that medical college. So taking medical college to every district place is one of the best ideas that I have heard so far. But only thing is that I have heard this idea 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and now again. Unless I see at least one hospital happening there, it is very difficult to believe. Pune already has 7 medical colleges, and there are probably permissions for 2 more going on in the pipeline. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? The latest medical college that is approved for Pune Municipal Corporation, is within 1.5 kilometers of existing one of the largest medical college in the country. What are we doing here? Right. So I think government will have to put their foot down and make sure that the top heavy medical services that we have right now actually become a proper bottom heavy pyramid, which works on preventative and primary healthcare within 5 kilometers from where everybody lives. This needs to be looked at as a public transport system. People need to have it within walking distance.
Right. A follow-up question to you. I know you brought this up a couple of times as well, but do you see a scope for recognizing validated, let's say, indigenous health systems, like, let's say, Ayurveda, for example, just to, cultivate that and, address the demand for healthcare as such?
See, I think there is huge amount of traditional knowledge that can be used. Let me put that as a first fact, that there is no sense of throwing away things about which we don't know much. But the fact still remains that if you are going to pay for it, we need to know that it works. Let me give you an example of arsenic album, which is going like a rage right now. Does government have a single case control study to prove that arsenic album works?
Oh.
This was given to all the police in Pune district by the Pune Police Commissioner.
Right.
Has government taken any action on that? We are under Epidemic Act.
No, but these are special circumstances as well.
Yeah, things are being thrown at public which are giving them a false sense of security. So unless government actually, in principle and in real spirit, agrees to a scientific outlook, our healthcare is not going to go anywhere. This was a wonderful opportunity for them to actually prove that homeopathy works. How come the opportunity hasn't been taken? Now they will say that we are going to have a research project, and the research project is already going on and whatnot. It's already been 2 months. Where are the results? These research projects have not even passed the mandate of ethics committee approval. So unless government takes a very clear scientific view, see, I would like to quote Isaac Asimov here, that I am willing to accept anything. I'm willing to believe anything, no matter how outlandish and how crazy it sounds, if it is supported by evidence. There is only one type of medicine, and that is evidence-based medicine. It does not matter whether it originates in America, it originates in Yunnan, it originates in Tibet, or it originates in India.
Right.
If there is adequate evidence for that, it should be used as medicine. But that evidence has to be solid, and it has to come by time-proven testing methods, not just Granthadhar that this was said 3,000 years ago, so that is enough for me to say. Have we even checked that whatever arsenic album is being distributed in all the housing societies around in Pune actually contains arsenic album? Is there any quality control at all?
Right. So couple of quick follow-ups on that, right? So one is let the consumer decide, right? The government need not endorse it. I mean, it can sort of regulate it and say that, hey, this passes for, let's say it's edible, right? Whatever this is that you're consuming, it's edible. We won't say anything beyond that, right? So that is one thing. Second, I guess, my idea in terms of broadening the base also for the supply is, like, bluntly put, do we need an MBBS doctor to address all of the ills on healthcare? Or, I mean, is there a scope for, let's say, midwives, or is there a scope for, other types of healthcare professionals?
I think you have hit the nail on the head. We do not need doctors to do all the jobs in healthcare.
Yeah.
In all developed countries, where, see, doctors invariably form the most expensive resource to train, to employ, and to maintain.
Yeah.
They should be used really sparingly. We do a great disservice to our nurses, our ayabais, our healthcare workers, our ASHA. See, ASHA workers who actually handle the grassroots level healthcare are not paid for 6 months at a go. How is this even acceptable? The thing that will need to happen is that from the ruling political class of all the parties, a clear message will need to go that you do not need doctors for everything. If you have ministers flying abroad just to treat their indigestion, you are giving a wrong message to people. And I must give credit to this government for that for the first time we see top government officials actually getting treated in public hospitals.
Yeah.
Right? So this is something that needs to happen, that the nurse who is very well trained can actually do 50-60% of the work of the doctor. We also need to streamline it by gatekeeping, that people do not abuse the system. Indians abuse the system like crazy. They take private treatment, they take public treatment, then they again go somewhere and pay for something else, and then make a decoction of that and eat it together. If government is going to pay for that, and ultimately taxpayer is going to pay for that, there has to be some way of actually making sure that the money is not wasted by reduplication of effort.
Right. So Prachi, I mean, listening to this, it must feel like there are like 1,000 ideas that one can work on within healthcare itself, right? What are some of the other opportunities that you see in primary, secondary, tertiary care?
See, I'll give you a simple answer and then expand on it. We understand that the burden on government is a lot, that the government to execute a lot of things, take it from an idea to an execution point of view, will take time for several reasons. So then we think of how do we sort of make whatever exists work, what the people or the systems that are already working, existing, executing for healthcare. I'll give you a small example, and I completely agree, healthcare has to get localized. It is a very hyper-local thing, right? What is the one thing that pops up in your head when you think of the first, related to healthcare, which is very close to your house? I'm asking you.
Yeah. Related to healthcare, close to my house, maybe a clinic down the road or something of that sort?
I think the answer is a pharmacy store.
Right? Pharmacy.
There will be one within 100% within 5 kilometers. If my estimates are right, there'll be one, at least two in a 1 kilometer radius itself. What has happened? A bunch of these are standalone. What has happened till now in terms of innovation to make sure that they become the first hyperlocal point of healthcare, right? That anyways the trust is there, right? You will go to this guy and you will ask him, I have a cold cough or I have a stomach ache. You anyways take that advice that probably you're supposed to get in a primary healthcare center. What can you do additionally to, one, make sure that these existing real estate, right, don't perish? Because if you look at the statistics, more than 80% of them are stagnating, right? They don't, and I'm giving an average figure, but they don't make more than 40-50,000 per month, and they have been doing that for the last 2-3 years, right? So then how do you make sure that they are incentivized and probably make use of that real estate? So we have a startup which does that, right? Makes them the first point of healthcare beyond anything that needs a interface with the doctor. Whether you have to book your diagnostics, whether you have to reach out for home healthcare, whether you need to book nurses, all of that. And this is a revolution that actually happened, right? If not to say that that's an ideal example, but look at US. What did Walgreens do? It just made branded the whole the 250,000 odd pharmacies into a brand, which meant there was standardization and there was some level of trust, right? And then it started doing a lot of basic healthcare services delivery through these centers, right? Let's look at another example, which is just the hospitals. Hospitals have one of the biggest problems that private hospitals have is unutilized capacity, right? From OT to the very expensive machines that they have, right? Again, we have a startup which is trying to cater to that with the element of hyperlocal, being integrated into the whole model. To say that, look, let's take Bangalore. There are at least 10 good large private hospitals in Bangalore, and all of them will have some OT capacity, let's say at least 40% unutilized OT capacity. Will the hospital be willing to pay a lower price for that OT capacity? The answer is an obvious yes. It's, something is better than letting that OT capacity go unutilized completely. And then what happens then? A patient will end up getting some sort of a surgery or a procedure done with the best facility at maybe 30 to 50% lower cost. And this is something that is validated. The other problem with primary healthcare right now is, again, a lot of these models were tried in tier 2. There is a chain of affordable hospitals, which is started out as a startup in Mysore, Hubli, Dharwad. The resounding evidence was that they didn't work. However, what worked? Some in the outside areas, peripheral areas of Bangalore, there's a startup which has primary healthcare centers. They started to function as excellent feeders into the hospitals, right? Because people still function from a mentality of saying that I need to travel to a big city to get any big procedure done.
Right.
50%
big treatment, basically.
Absolutely. 50% of the surgeries, the non-emergency surgeries that happen in the private hospitals, again, I'm talking about Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, and I think this is, you can see this across the big Indian cities. 50% of them come from the tier 2 and the tier 3, who've given up one day's job or however they are employed and traveled to the city to now. How do you make that, if that is still happening, right? How do you make it worth their while? You can ensure that first, if it's a non-emergency, it is taken to the model of an elective care where they get ambulatory care, as it is called popularly now. They get discharged within 24 hours. You can make sure that you just rejig the models in a way that they end up paying less, especially because they are going to pay out of pocket.
Right.
And eventually you can make sure that the trust that is created around these primary centers is incentivized, right? People begin to trust, and primary healthcare also has a very subtle element to it underlying, which is of preventive healthcare. People in India don't think preventive right now. They think of it as an episode, and when it has reached the point of an episode, the only thing that can satiate your anxiety is to actually have a face-to-face with a doctor. And there you go, right? The problem is then it compounds because something has already happened, and then the best form of healthcare needs to be given to this person. Otherwise, it becomes a life issue.
Right. So Varun, as I'm listening to Prachi and Dr. Bhushan as well, right? So it's not just a capacity issue; it's also a utilization issue, right? I mean, it's just that all of the stuff that we have. I mean, and we heard Dr. Bhushan talk about it as well. The many schemes that are announced, whether it's adoption of these schemes or utilization of these OTs, as Prachi mentioned, and all these facilities, right? Does the government have the data to say that, hey, you know what, this 40% is underutilized? Can I figure a way to help these guys sort of utilize that, right? Can I improve efficiency on all of these existing infrastructure that I have?
Yeah, well, that's definitely one very key area of focus, and there are two things here. One is having some sort of a behavioral change with regard to utilization of the services. Now, when you look at the poor and the vulnerable population, the pathway that they used to follow is that if someone in their family has got a serious ailment, let's say a cancer or or got some sort of a blockage in the artery, they generally did not go for the treatment. That used to be basically, like the end of the life for that particular person. The second thing was that they used to probably sell off all their assets, go into huge debts, and probably try to attempt for one particular surgery. Now, with all these programs that are getting announced, all these different schemes that are getting announced, I think one very important aspect that has been focused on is how to sensitize beneficiaries and how to create that type of awareness that now you are protected through this particular program, and you have this particular entitlement, so you should go and take that particular treatment. That has been one very key focus. The second one that I often keep hearing, and that is, I think, something very important, is to have some sort of an equitable load distribution. How do we have this equitable load distribution is probably through something like a referral system. If you look at Karnataka, when we look at their Arogya Karnataka scheme, back in 2018, when they started implementing, they also experimented with the referral system. What essentially it means is that at every particular level of care, that level of care should only serve those people who are at that particular risk severity. So if you are a cancer hospital, it should not get over flooded by people who want OPD on fever or on common cold. It should only be the consultation should only be for the people who have already shown some sort of a symptoms of having a cancer. uh, so the idea behind this is to have some sort of a load distribution, that in the tertiary hospitals you get extremely severe cases who require either surgery or hospitalization. In the secondary, you require medical treatments or your daytime surgeries, and in the primary, basically your OPDs and consultation. So there is definitely a need for something like this, and we are working on creating some sort of a module which can probably implement something sort of a similar to a referral module. So I think that particular mechanism, what it will do is that it will rationalize the existing demand and supply. Because what is really happening right now is that there are pockets of hospitals which are completely maxed out occupancy, and if I want to get a surgery done, they will give me a waiting time of 6 months, 7 months. And then there are pockets of hospitals which have an occupancy of 30%, 40%. So they have that occupancy in their particular hospitals, but because the beneficiaries don't know that this hospitals exist, that doctor is available, whether their infrastructure is present or not, they are not able to go and access that particular treatment. So if we have some sort of a digital infrastructure which can empower the citizens with regard to this particular decision making, I think that will tremendously help. This all this discussion, it makes me come to the point that along with everything, of course, we need a very robust primary system, but along with everything, what we really require is a very strong digital infrastructure which actually connects all these three different levels of care. Right now, and this is something that even Prachi said, that how all the startups, they end up spiraling into electronic health record. But the problem is that so far we haven't started the EHR solution, and that is something that we want to start. And that particular solution will be solving for a lot of problem. It will start right from ensuring that the health workers are empowered. There is a strong monitoring of the precautions and the preventive care. There is a some sort of module for referral. So that digital infrastructure is something which is extremely required. And I think once we get that, that will actually serve as a tool for interoperability between all these three levels of care. So you might be knowing that the government has announced the national digital health blueprint.
Yeah.
And recently the finance minister has also approved that. So I think that is one very big intervention that is going to come in the health system. And that is not something of a physical infrastructure, but it is something more of an enabler, which will enable all these three different levels of care to work in proper harmony. So I think this is one particular solution that we should actively focus on and try to see how we can rationalize all these three different levels of care.
Right. Right. So, Dr. Bhushan, how do you see the patient's attitude within all of this? Right. I mean, do you see that changing post-COVID? I mean, we were talking earlier about how people have done fantastically well to adapt to this new paradigm and so on. Right. How do you see that panning out? How do you see that going forward?
That's a really difficult one to answer, to be very honest, Roshan, because I'm sure, as Varun knows this very well, that 140 people looking in one direction and taking a step together is almost unheard of. So unless government does something really radical to help people fall into this system, this is going to be tricky. Indians panic very quickly. And once they panic, they fall back on absolutely useless mechanisms, which becomes very wasteful, and it becomes impossible to organize in any way at all. We have seen that with lockdown and unlocking as well. So government has a very, very complicated job there. Believe me, as you have said again and again, I would hate to be in Varun's position right now, because the amount of effort that one has to put in and the amount of output that one gets, and sometime far in the future, is totally disproportionate. So will people take it? Two takes on that a strata of society which has no access to healthcare or has no money to healthcare will definitely take it, because they have honestly no other options. The upper strata, the top 2%, will never take it because they don't need it and they have the means. The real acid test for this would be the large middle class which is expanding. Will they take government healthcare into their fold and call it their own? Will they call something completely impersonal as their own healthcare? And I think that will be the real acid test of whether this system is good enough or not.
Right. Okay, so I think this has been like a fascinating chat about everything related to healthcare, right? And as it often happens, I mean, it throws more problems than solutions. Like you keep thinking, like how are you going to wrap your head around some of these things and so on. So I want to end on an optimistic note. So I just want to do a round the table question, starting with you, Prachi. What are you optimistic about in terms of healthcare in India?
Right. See, so I'm in the business of funding innovation, right? So my optimism
You have no option but to be optimistic.
I have to share the entrepreneur's optimism of starting a successful venture. And on that note, I gain my optimism from two fronts. One, I think startups are the levers that are going to recognize how to unbundle unutilized assets, whether it's physical or digital, to make sure ultimately that affordability and access are solved. That's one. Second, I think science is going to play a bigger role, whether it's in bringing down the cost or just making treatments better. And that science innovation will come out of India, just because of the kind of advantages and the talent that we have in terms of that. And I'm bullish on both of these sort of playing out in a way that it impacts 50 to 100 million people in the next 5 years, as well as becoming standalone successful ventures on their own.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. Varun, from a policy perspective, from the government perspective, what are you optimistic about? I mean, India is a large country. Sorry, the very complex system to handle. What keeps you going back to work every day?
Well, that's a good question. There are a lot of things that push me, to go back to my work. But before I say that, what are my three key areas of optimism? My optimism stems from number one, Ayushman Bharat's progress in last 20 months. The type of scale that we have covered. The second point is some of the recent positive regulations and some of the positive initiatives that we have seen. Like before 2 months, India used to import PPE kits. Today we are making 4 lakh PPE kits. Before 2 months, we used to import swabs at 17 rupees. Today we are manufacturing that at 2 rupees. So that gives someone like me a tremendous hope. And the third one is the type of behavioral change that I am seeing among citizens. Now, why that is very important is because it finally is the citizen and their behavior which will basically determine the fate. And why I'm saying that is because when I go out on roads, I see every single person wearing masks, and this has just happened within 2 months. So what even some of the earlier panelists said, that we are very risk averse, and we are fearing people in general. And I think that is leading to some sort of a positive behavior. The hygiene standards are also drastically improving. So these are my bright spots. And what I'm really optimistic about is, first is that through Ayushman Bharat, the economic and the social status of the poor and vulnerable citizens is going to gradually increase in the next 5 to 6 years, because of the savings that they have in the against the catastrophic health expenditure. So I am very hopeful of that, and I feel that a large chunk of this particular section will actually start getting converted to the middle class population. So that middle class will get augmented. The second part that I'm actually very optimistic about, and here I share my optimism with Prachi, is I believe that we will see a lot of success stories and a lot of scaling up of innovations. And this would be in both, public health system as well as private health system. Because, the pandemic has actually, really made us reflect some of the fault areas. And not only in India, this is across the world. And, people would be looking at innovations with a much better insight and with a much better value proposition. And the third part that I'm actually, very optimistic about is the whole public-private engagement. If you look at the Indian economy, we have a large amount of years wherein we thought that all of this particular societal responsibility and the social responsibility should fall on the shoulders of government. We rather realized it quite late that a PPP model is something which can be worked out. So, I think now, we have various case studies wherein a PPP model is actually delivered in a very time constraint and in an economic viable manner. So I think going forward, my optimism lies on the success of the PPP framework, whether it's with regard to, catering care, building more hospitals, building, laboratories, or, giving out treatment, and, even things like making technologies. So, I'm very hopeful on that. So Ayushman Bharat, innovations, and public-private partnership. I think that is what I'm really optimistic about.
Fantastic. Also very neatly summed up as well. So, Dr. Bhushan, I'm going to come to you at the end. As a doctor, I mean, it's very difficult. I understand that you see, perhaps more than any one of us, you see suffering firsthand. You see these certain inefficiencies play out as well on a daily basis. Yet, would you remain optimistic for our future in healthcare in India?
No, I'm sorry, Roshan, but no, I'm not optimistic. And I'm very sad to say that, for a simple reason that all over the world, there are various medical systems that work. And the systems that actually deliver efficiently and to maximum number of people with zero input at the point of contact are very uniform systems, are very streamlined systems, and they minimize the role of private sector as far as patient contact is concerned. Looking at Germany's system or Japan's system or even NHS UK, my take is that, and this is my gut feeling since last few years, that we are heading the American way, where healthcare gradually becomes expensive. As GDP increases, as purchasing capacity increases, more and more insurance companies come into play, and the money transfer happens between your insurance payment and the big corporations, where actually the consumer is extremely unhappy. One of the unhappiest consumers, health consumers in the world are American. And I am very sad to say that we are driving towards the American system absolutely full throttle towards the abyss. So I'm not very hopeful.
So
I hope
what
we
will
have
it,
here.
sorry, so what will it take to move to that single payer system? And you think, I mean, do you think we can make that transition?
See, you know, I'm a capitalist at heart kind of person. I'm an Ayn Rand fan.
Right.
But capitalism has limitations. And we know that primary education and healthcare and capitalism don't mix.
Right.
Wherever people have tried to mix them, we have resulted in an absolute disaster. So even a hyper-capitalist country like US still has primary education system which is in the hands of government and local governments. Healthcare is their weak point. That is why I genuinely believe that a proper healthcare delivery system where doctors are not businessmen but salaried individuals. All the healthcare workers work on a salary without incentive. This is paid for by the tax collected together, and it is a streamlined, proper, what you say, a system-driven treatment. That is our only hope. If we bring in profit makers into this at service providing level, then we are in trouble. They have a significant role in innovation and making the system more efficient. But if they are going to look at this as investment, then they would expect a return on their investment, and a poor country like India cannot afford to give them that.
Right. Okay. That's, I guess, I mean, plenty to think about for us from this discussion. Thank you, Dr. Bhushan, for joining us. Thank you, Prachi. Thank you, Varun, as well. You know, there were plenty of threads that, you know, we could possibly pick on and, you know, do individual podcasts by themselves. Goes to show the depth of understanding and expertise that our guests have brought to the table today. Again, thank you very much for your time. Thanks everyone who tuned in to listen. This podcast is live on all popular platforms like Anchor.fm, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, and YouTube, and a bunch of others. If you liked this podcast, please subscribe and share it with your friends and family as well. So until next time, please stay safe and Jai Hind. Thank you.